This is part 4 of my lecture on Augustine's Confessions. Let's now turn to Book 7. Augustine was familiar with the theory of the universe that was put forth by the Neoplatonists, and that theory affects his own interpretation of Christianity. We see that Augustine mentions the hierarchy of being. He writes that what is corruptible is inferior to that which cannot be corrupted. What is immune from injury I put above that which is not immune. What suffers no change better than that which can change. And Augustine believes that God must be incorruptible and unchangeable. He also believes that God is the supreme and highest good. So where the Neoplatonists maintain that the good or the one is the supreme being in the hierarchy of the good or in the hierarchy of being, Augustine maintains that it is God, a being that Augustine believes to be a rational thinking being who is all good and all powerful. Augustine also believes that God is unchangeable and immutable. But there's a certain problem that bothers him. A problem remained to trouble me. Although I affirmed and firmly held divine immunity from pollution and change and the complete immutability of our God, who made all rational beings and everything, yet I had no clear and explicit grasp of the cause of evil. He writes that Christianity tells us that moral evil results when we act on our free choice of the will. He explains that when he wills to do something, it's clear that he is the one doing the willing, as not someone else, and certainly not God. So he reasons, moral evil must be the result of a person's exercising their will and does not derive from God. So Augustine's solution to the problem of evil with respect to moral evils like murder, theft, and cheating is that such moral evil are not God's doing and they are not God's responsibility. Instead, moral evils result from humans exercising their free will and choosing the bad or evil option. He then considers a problem with the solution to the problem of evil. But who made me? Is not my God not only good but the supreme good? Why then have I the power to will evil and to reject good? Who put this power in me and implanted in me this seed of bitterness when all of me was created by my very kind God? In other words, if God is all good and God created us, why didn't God create us with wills that only act on what is good? God could still have created beings with free will, but they would be beings who always use their will for the good. In other words, it seems that God could have created the world without any jerks. Augustine considers a similar problem. Taking into account the fact that God is immutable, incorruptible, and the highest good, it would seem that if God exists and creates everything, it must be the case that whatever God wills is good. So Augustine wonders why there are bad people who do terrible things to others. God is good, and is most mightily and incomparably superior to the finite things in the world. But being God, God created good creatures. Then where and whence is evil? How did it creep in? What is its root? What is its seed? Or does it not have any being? Why should we fear and avoid what has no being? Yet we still fear. Thus either it is evil which we fear, or our fear that is evil. Where then does it come from, since the good God makes everything good? Certainly the greatest and supreme good made lesser goods, yet the Creator and all that he created are good. What then is the origin of evil? Recall that Augustine believes that what is made of matter is thereby less than perfect and lacking in good. But then he wonders whether that means that there is something that God cannot do. Either God cannot make something out of matter that contains no evil, or God cannot make a world without making some things out of matter. But it seems that an omnipotent being, an all-powerful being, would be able to create matter that contains no evil and make a world without some material things in it. Since God is omnipotent, Augustine wonders why it would be the case that we have material things in the world and that matter is lacking in good. Was he powerless to turn and transform all matter so that no evil remained, even though God is omnipotent? Finally, why did God want to make anything out of such stuff and not rather use his omnipotence to ensure that there was no matter at all? Such questions, Augustine writes, revolved in my unhappy breast, weighed down by nagging anxieties about the fear of dying before I had found the truth. Augustine then maintains that that which is wholly certain is that all things that are corrupted suffer privation of some good. If they were deprived of all good, they wouldn't exist at all. Therefore, as long as they exist, they are good. Accordingly, whatever things exist are good, and the evil into whose origins I was inquiring is not a substance. For if it were a substance, it would be good. You made all things good, and there are absolutely no substances which you did not make. So one way that Augustine attempts to solve the problem of evil is by maintaining that since whatever is a substance must have been created by God, and since everything created by God is thereby good, all substances in the universe are good. Since God is all good, God cannot create anything that is bad or evil, so no substance in the universe is evil. Therefore, nothing in the world is evil and everything is good. However, things do differ with respect to their degree of goodness, and some things are more good than others. Thus, what we call evil is just something that is lacking a whole lot in goodness. I can imagine that some might reject Augustine's claims that there is no evil in the world and that there are only differing degrees of goodness by maintaining that Augustine's account doesn't seem compelling for those things that are on the far end of the spectrum. Think here of the most horrific events in human history. There are plenty of examples, and it's not that difficult to come up with at least one really bad thing. Now, Augustine will assess the example that you're thinking about and explain that it's not really evil. It's merely lacking a whole lot in good. Does Augustine's solution work to reconcile the existence of an all-good, all-powerful God and whatever horrible event you were thinking about? Perhaps some might maintain that an omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent being would have been able to figure out a way to prevent at least some of the most atrocious and heinous activities from ever occurring. Now, Augustine would have a response to such a concern. Augustine may well maintain that even the most horrific events, when considered in the grand scheme of things, are part of the greater good. For you, evil does not exist at all, and not only for you, but for your created universe, because nothing outside it which could break in and destroy the order which you have imposed upon it. But in the parts of the universe, there are certain elements which are thought evil because of a conflict of interest. These elements are congruous with other elements, and as such are good, and are also good in themselves. All these elements which have some mutual conflict of interest are congruous with the inferior part of the universe which we call Earth. Augustine's solution here takes the form of what is typically called the ultimate harmony solution to the problem of evil, which goes something like this. There is no evil in the world because everything was created by an all-good, all-powerful God. The things that are thought to be evil are merely less good than others. Although some things when taken in isolation might be thought to be evil, when we don't consider anything in isolation from anything else, that is, when we consider the universe as a whole and don't take anything in isolation from everything else, then we can see that everything is in harmony and everything is good. Often an explanation of the ultimate harmony solution to the problem of evil uses the metaphor of music. Here's a typical description of the ultimate harmony solution to the problem of evil. A chord heard in isolation may sound dissonant and ugly, but when heard in context blends into a perfect whole or an ultimate harmony. So it is with evil. What human beings call evil is an event seen out of context, in isolation. And since a human has only a fragmentary view of events, this is the only way they can see it. God, however, who has an overall view of events, sees how such events are good in the long run, or good from an overall viewpoint. But there are some problems for the ultimate harmony solution to the problem of evil. Someone might raise an objection against the ultimate harmony solution that goes something like this. According to the ultimate harmony solution, if we could see everything in the way that God does, if we could have a God's eye view of events, we would see that the forest fires on the West Coast, the hurricanes battering the South, and the pandemic that's affecting everyone on Earth might, when considered in isolation, seem to be bad. But in the grand scheme of things, they are good in the long run, or good from an overall point of view. But one might argue, because everything is part of a God designed grand plan, we'll be going against that plan if we try to interfere with it in any way. And that would seem to mean that we shouldn't try to put out the fires or warn people of an impending storm or be working to try to find a cure for any disease. Otherwise, we'll be working against the grand divine plan. But such a person might argue, it certainly seems like we ought to try to help those who are or might be affected by a natural disaster. Indeed, it just seems wrong to do absolutely nothing in the face of any such actual or impending threat to humanity. So one might conclude, the ultimate harmony solution fails to resolve the problem of evil. This ends part 4 of the lecture. As you turn to part 5, you might take a moment to reflect on the ultimate harmony solution to the problem of evil. Think about how it works. Think about the objection that we just raised against it. And think about whether there's a response to that objection.